Hey gang, Joyce Eskimicast Farms here. I tried to show you a little bit earlier how there's a lot of activity around my hive today because it's the first day in a very long time that they've been able to get out and fly. And so I can't really see the screen, but I can see the real life thing, and you ought to be able to see all the bees coming and going from that single opening at this end. It's the first time that the weather's been warm enough, long enough for them to be able to break their cluster. They go into a kind of a semi-dormant state. It's really not, oh gosh, what does they call it? Like when a hibernation. It's not like a bear hibernates. It's more than that. But it's still before Valentine's Day in February, and it's sunny and it's 50, and the bees are out and they're doing their cleansing flights because they may not have gotten out of the hive in 3 weeks. So they're all kind of enjoying it. And I'm in Tennessee, and so we have warm spells for a few days, and then it gets cold, and then it gets warm, and then it gets cold. Most people lose their hives over the winter in February and March in this part of the country. Why? Because the bees will starve. Because once they break dormancy, they got to eat. Look, there's no leaves, there's no blooms, there's no nothing anywhere. Where are they going to get nectar and pollen? So now is when you really have to kind of be careful. That gray box on top is a feeder. It uses what is called a rapid feeder. It's a plastic tray that fits right over the top of the box, and they can go up in there and eat sugar or sugar water. I've gotten out of the habit of feeding them sugar water. For the most part, I just feed them some dry sugar if they really need it. Why? Because they'll like the sugar syrup, and commercial beekeepers do that to push their bees, especially breeders. But I've just got the one hive here. I don't harvest their honey. I don't push them, but I will put the dry sugar in the top. Why? So they don't starve. Because it only takes about 3 days for a hive to starve. If they're totally out of honey reserves inside, and you get a 5 or 6 day warm spell, and the trees still look like that, you can have your hive collapse. So, and just starve, and then you'll go back in, and there's all these dead bees hanging all over the hive, all over the frames of the hive. So really don't want that to happen, but it's the first time I've seen any bees, and so that tells me there's probably a pretty good number of bees. We're going to have about 10 days of warm weather. What I don't want them to do is for the queen to lay a bunch of eggs and then have it go cold again, because they'll try to protect the larvae instead of clustering back up if it gets real cold, and they'll freeze. It's essentially the same thing. So, but I will go in, not right now. We'll go in later today, pop the top off of that, or earlier tomorrow when they're not so active, when it's still early, and pop the top on that lid. I checked it about a week or 10 days ago, and they were down about a half, so I topped it off then, so they should be in pretty good shape. But that's what it looks like when a hive is breaking dormancy or hibernation and they're coming out and doing cleansing flights. It looks like they're doing all these figure eights and stuff, and they're doing that also to reorient themselves to the hive. Here in the garden, I put the leaves down. I'm going to bounce around a little bit. I had dug these up with a grub hoe and then flipped them over. I'm going to try and do just like a square foot gardening thing at the end of my rows for my garden. I think I'm going to try and put some Swiss chard in there. I'll have to come back and shake all that dirt out and get all those roots out, and then maybe add a little bit of aged manure and whatever. But I thought I'd try to do that. Just something kind of, just another little something to try. I'm not a huge fan of Swiss chard, but it's supposed to be good for you, so I'll try some. And what I'm doing here is, I showed you earlier where I put down the leaves. You can see zoom back out here. Put down the leaves, and then I showed you where I got the hay from up there, and I put it in the cart. And then how did I get it out of the cart? Well, I remembered from Isaac, and I think the other guy with him at the time was Sean. Isaac was Greg Judy's former farm manager, and they came up with a technique called Pet the Cat. What are you talking about, Joyce? Well, when they've got a full-size bale and they want to be able to roll it out in the wintertime, if you roll it this way, you'll get 100, 150 yards, and it just comes off real nice and thin, and you don't have to fork it. It's just very fast, very efficient, a great way to feed your cows. Also, later on, what Isaac started doing was he would run a single, if I can find my finger, he would run a single long wire down his windrow of hay. If he wanted to get maximum consumption of that hay from those cows, that's what he'd do. He'd just put a single wire a little bit lower. Why? Because then the cows aren't going to be walking across it and soiling it. But they'd still line up on this side and line up on this side like they would on two sides of a feed trough and consume it. Very, very efficient. Very, very efficient use of hay. So what I tried to do is I tried to figure out, okay, well, if I tried to do the Pet the Cat method, what you want is you want the hay to be on the top, to be smooth going this way. So if the head of the cat is there, you're going to pet the cat this way, right? So if you pet the cat this way, you want the hay is going to roll that way, and that's going to roll off thin. Now, did it work real good for me? No. Why? It's a 3 or 4 year old hay bale, and look, I'm right at the end of the bale. So once you get down to this small part of the bale, it doesn't roll nearly as effectively. But I'm still able to just roll. I started down there by where the cart was. It took me about 2 minutes to come and get half of this done. Well, maybe 3 or 4. But it just took me a few minutes because it took me that long to figure out, okay, which end do I got to start from? Which side do I want to go from? How do I want to try and do this? Because I didn't want to have to manhandle it twice. And so that took me a couple of minutes. Mostly because I walked over to my new bale of hay that I've got. Where is it? I can't see where I'm pointing at. Over there between the semi, right in there, that's the corner of the greenhouse. I got the hay bale over there, and I'm going, okay, so it's facing this way, it's rolling this way, okay. So if I'm doing it off the top, it's going to go this way. If I lean it this way, that's going to be this way. So I'm not a real super duper gifted person when it comes to visualizing things in 3D. I got to get it in my head first. I can't just figure it out like, mechanics and folks like that do. So, but the wind is picking up. It's getting mid-afternoon. That's why the bees are out, because it's just about the warmest part of the day. And so I'm gonna go ahead, and I'm able to roll this very efficiently. I'm gonna have to slide it over just a couple of inches and move on down, and then the rest of it I'm just kind of fluffing a little bit with my hands and feet, and that's it, and I'm gonna be done. So what's my point? My point is, gang, sometimes I know I talk about it, but what you think doesn't matter. How you think is key. And a lot of times, if you've done a lot of study and you've watched and paid attention on a lot of videos, or you've gone to grazing school and you hear grazers who've been doing it for 25 years, and they keep talking about techniques that they use over and over and over again. There's another thing I use a lot, and it's what I'll call a variation of a theme. What's that? It's that you can take the idea of rolling a hay bale for out on a pasture, and then do the same thing here for putting it over leaves. It's just a variation on the theme, but I don't have a hay roller. I had to figure out, okay, well, how is this going to be oriented, and how am I going to do that with a little hand cart? So you just have to learn to observe and to think. And Greg Judy says just about everything he learned from Ian Mitchell Innes. And Ian Mitchell Innes can think outside the box better than anybody I know. And I've listened to a lot of people online. Why? Because he thinks about the fundamentals. He does holistic management. If you've got the same principles and the same goals, you can do 1,000 different options based on your individual context. That's why he was able to increase the productivity on his farm 6.5 times. Basically, he can carry 7.5 times the number of cows on his farm in South Africa than he could when he first started. That's like getting 6 farms for free, gang. So if you want to talk about making a profit, or if you just want to talk about taking a small place like this and maybe not even worrying about making a profit, but maybe be able to increase my carrying capacity from 2 sheep to 4 sheep just on this little place, or maybe talk about doubling the productivity of my garden, and it's the difference between having to buy something at the store and not. Those kinds of things over time are huge, but they take time, and they take thought, and they take consistency, and they take patience, because we're such a microwave generation, and nature just doesn't give a damn. Oops, excuse me, sorry about my language. Nature just doesn't care. Nature's gonna fix it, but she don't care if it takes a while. She really doesn't. So if we can understand her thought process, if I can use that phrase, and her principles, then we can put those principles on steroids. We can speed those up. We can fast forward those. But if we don't understand the principles and the relationships in our own context, we're going to crash and burn. So, but I just thought that was so cool. I spent more time talking here than I did going and getting the hay and bringing it down and figuring it out and rolling it out. So with that, gang, I'm going to say blessings for the day, and whatever you do, just keep chasing the dream. And I may even have more hay than I need. That'll be nice. Till then, blessings for the day, and keep chasing the dream.